Hey everybody, this is Dilla. Welcome to the Dilla and Doug Experience. Today I have a special guest by the name of Mr. Bernard Yankinson. Am I saying it right?
No, you're not.
Yankson.
It's just Yankson, like
Yankson.
son of a Yank.
Son of a Yankee.
Right, Yankson.
And this is a very interesting person. A very controversial person.
You got to explain how I'm controversial, but continue with the introduction.
Thanks to my brother, the Barber Dash, Mr. Anthony, for speaking to me about him. And finally, I had a chance, an opportunity to attend one of your sessions, which was mind-blowing. And I don't know what else to explain to people for them to understand how revolutionary the information you have has on a human mindset. So ever since, I've always been very curious. How much more can I learn from you? And so forgive me for always calling you up on weird hours of the night, sending you messages, and thank you for being patient with me and responding to my messages promptly, even sending me documents. And I always say, Google it. You have Wikipedia, use it. And I'm always getting, I'm like, why can't you just say, I know you found it. I'm like, yeah, I found it. Or I failed to find it. I'm like, okay, this is the direction you go. And then later on, and thank you for doing that, because that gives me more insight on how to search for these things. Because if I was always calling you to get information, it makes me lazier to find it myself. So I appreciate you for pushing me towards that. Now, I would like you to introduce yourself the way you should be introduced properly. I think I have not done justice. Who is Bernard Yankinson?
Well, a lot of people know me by a variety of different names, and because I do a variety of different things.
Right.
And I think, in a nutshell,
right,
I would like to classify myself as a problem solver.
Right, okay.
So I think that speaks to just about everything that I do.
All right.
Is that I'm always looking to figure out and solve a problem. And so, as you indicated when you were saying that you would call me from time to time and,
yes,
and ask me for information.
Right.
There's a rule of thumb that I practice, which is it's really important not to take away someone's struggle.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
And with that, I got kids.
Right.
And
I do too.
And I make it really challenging for them all the time.
Right.
Right. And they can do it. I got a 3-year-old who can do it. He can add, but that's just, he's got a sister that really helps him. And,
right.
So with everybody else, it's easier to work with kids than it is to work with a lot of people that are set in their ways. So again, going back to who am I?
Right.
Somebody who likes to really solve problems.
Okay.
Currently, I have a business. I have several businesses.
Right.
And the business that you were introduced to was Landing Interest for Estates Foundation.
Right.
Also known as Life Foundation.
Right.
And Life Foundation is a society.
Right.
Registered society.
Right.
And that registered society helps businesses understand how to structure their business. A lot of people don't know how to structure their business.
Okay.
And they also get insights into what the options are in the legal world regarding different types of business structures, which also include unincorporations.
Okay.
Okay. And so a lot of people have never even heard of an unincorporation.
Right. And
So just let me finish. So part of my business practice is to help them understand that there are incorporations and there are unincorporations.
okay.
And if they really did a firm search, they would find that these are legal entities,
Right.
meaning that you can find them within the tax code.
Right.
But an unincorporation is mistakenly spoken of to a lot of people as dissolution. So, and logically, that would kind of make sense if you were kind of doing the logic, incorporation versus unincorporation.
Okay.
So you just assume, but that's just an assumption, okay?
Right.
So really, part of my job is to help people move past assumptions,
Okay.
okay?
Right. Now, that's another reason why I was very eager and I'm very excited for you to be here today, because there's so many things I want to ask you, but I don't think the time was going to be enough. So I might have you come back here another time so we can do a bunch of follow-ups. But for the sake of time and today, the main topics I wanted to discuss and I wanted personally to explore with you. One is the lending interest for estate foundation. What is that?
Well, in the word sound, landing interest for estates. And what that means is, when you land anywhere,
Right.
typically you just assume that you land on your feet, you land on the ground, you land on the earth.
Okay.
And so we'll visit landing after we'll go through the rest.
Okay.
Interest.
Right.
And interest seems to be a word that seems to be very intangible, doesn't really mean anything. You have an interest in this, you have an interest in that.
Right.
And then estates. And estates, the best way to really describe estates outside of what you would find.
Right.
And so I use this approach because there's different legal definitions for different things.
Okay.
So, but estates, the best way that I can describe estates is many of us have a lot of different legal accounts. We have a business account.
Right.
We have documents that are legal. We have identification that is legal. We live in a
Right.
legal setting. And so where all of our transactions and accounts are concerned, so we may have an account with Vital Stats. We may have an account with Ministry of Transportation. We may
Right.
have an account with Ministry of Health. These are all different accounts that everybody's going to say, well, those are governmental accounts. And so you have different governmental accounts, and all of your accounts in totality,
Right.
I would describe as your estates.
Oh, so that would be my estate.
The totality of all of your accounts are your estates. So for example, how you enter into your legal estates is,
Right.
When you're born, that's how you enter into it with your first document.
Birth certificate.
Right. So that would be a document with a branch of the so-called government. The government is a generalized term for all these different entities that are performing a social service.
Okay.
And that's really important, where people need programs in order to get themselves going.
Okay.
Okay. And
Right.
so Landing Interest for Estates Foundation also offers types of social programs that the government just does not have time to do
Right.
and is not in their interest to do.
I was about to say that.
So that's neither negative or positive.
Okay.
Okay. Because the government's job, as I explain it to a lot of people, is their job is to manage abandoned property.
I've heard you say that before.
So for example, if you left your car out in the middle of nowhere and you left the car,
Right.
then who's responsible for picking up that trash? Well, somebody has to be responsible, because it could create and potentially is a hazard.
That's true.
So most people are not paying attention, but the government follows legal procedure. So in order for the government to go and remove that so-called car
Right.
or abandoned property,
Right.
they would put out a notice
Right.
for the so-called owner, registered owner, to go and pick up that car. And if they did not pick up that car,
Right.
then they have legal precedence. They have legal reason in order not only to take the car, but to make the claim for that car. Why? Because it's been abandoned.
So technically, a lot of things are abandoned.
Yeah, a lot of things have been abandoned, but we have to know what those things are.
Right.
And a lot of property has been abandoned, and we have to understand what property is.
Right.
And property falls under two categories. There's real property,
Right.
or better yet, there's tangible property,
Right.
or intangible property. And intangible property is property that can be moved around. A car, you can move it around. Your clothes, you can move it around.
Okay.
And so that's intangible property. And then tangible property is what is presumed as property that stays in the same location. And so they refer to that as real estate, but real estate is really identifying the land. So that location, that square designation, that never moves. That's always in the same place.
It's always in the same place.
Right. But what's on that land is known as a fixture. And that fixture can come up, can be put up and can be taken down. So these are the two types of property. But let's go back to personal property, which is intangible property, which is movable property. Movable property means that you can move it, you can change it. And our rights are also our property.
Say that again. Our rights are our property.
So our rights are also our property.
Okay.
And which means that a right, if it's going to be property, has to be something that you can prove. If it's going to be property. Because
Right.
property typically has to be something that you can put into your hand. So the best example that I like to give is, let's say you're a genius and you invented the equation for time travel.
I wish.
Okay? And it's in your head.
Right.
Right? So that's personal property, right?
So
It's intangible property.
is that is that something like intellectual property?
Yeah, that falls under
IP.
personal property. It falls under intangible property. It's just a category within personal property.
Okay.
That's all.
All
right?
right. Okay. Please continue.
So it's in your head, this movable property.
Right.
And so at that point, it's not really tangible, but then you put it on paper.
Right.
And when you put it on paper, the paper carries your thoughts, right? It literally, so the paper becomes personal property, right? And
Right.
in order for you to claim to say that's mine,
Right.
in order for you to say that, typically the way the law works is that you should have a process that secures that it's yours.
Okay.
Otherwise, imagine if I was a pirate
Right.
or somebody else was a pirate and they came and they took that piece of paper
Right.
and now they have possession of the piece of paper. So now making the claim that that's your property becomes a problem, right? There's a dispute.
Dispute with who? I mean, if
Well,
it's
anybody,
my
the
property.
pirate that takes the property, that's holding on to the property. Even though equitably you created the property,
Right.
you put it on paper. The paper is now a vessel that holds your thoughts.
Right.
You wrote it out. And so what was lacking is a process to prove that it was yours.
It was yours. Okay.
Okay. And so where the government comes along is the government understands these types of scenarios,
Right.
and they establish different types of venues, programs to help people secure their property. So that would allow people to secure their property in a legal manner, in a legal fashion. Okay?
Legal.
Yeah, in a legal fashion.
Okay.
Okay. All right. In a legal fashion. So personal property, that we're talking about personal property again. So
Right.
that's my example for personal property.
Right.
And so we're talking about your rights are your personal property.
Right.
Okay. And a lot of people believe that, and it's a belief,
Right.
right? And we also have to know what a belief is, but a lot of people believe that they have rights. Okay, so let's just stop there. So to have something is to be in possession. You know, in the example that I gave, I put it on paper and now I don't have it. Somebody else is holding on to that property.
What do you mean? Give me an example.
Well, they just took my written equations for time travel.
Right.
Now they are in possession and making a claim that it belongs to them.
Okay.
So they have the right to make the claim, whether it's true or false.
Right.
They are in possession. And the way the law apparently works, and when I refer to the law, I'm talking about what everybody understands as the law,
right,
being legal. What's legal?
Right.
Right? Not necessarily equity.
Right.
But he's in possession of these ideas. These items. This property. Right. My right to say it's mine, right, he's in possession of it.
Right.
Now, let me just go back. So, rights are presumed, but before they're even presumed, they assume that people have possession of them. They have them, which goes back to my initial statement being a right is something that you must produce. You must go out and do. You must go out and secure. And once you've secured the right,
right,
then you have possession of that thing. Then you can say, I have rights. Then you don't refer to your thoughts about the right. You refer to your documentation process concerning those rights. So let me give you an example. Let me give you an example of that.
All right.
So there's legal, and I'm referring to legal, and right, a lot of businesses out there are registered businesses, and they're legal businesses, and nobody's going to question that their business is not legal. Right? They have the registration.
Right.
But then I can state that, yeah, you have a legal business, but your business is not lawful.
Wait a minute. What's the difference?
So anybody can Google the difference. And when you do any Google search, make sure you find a variety of different searches in order to make a comparison so that you feel like you have really vetted the different definitions and found a middle ground for that definition. But my definition, right, is a definition to simplify what the difference is between the two.
Right.
Essentially, the difference in one word is ownership. So right, the people that have these legal businesses are not the owners of their business, but they have possession of their business.
Wait a minute.
And what? that's neither a positive or a negative thing.
Okay.
Right? Because you have to understand that this is a service that's been performed for them. Okay? Now they have a duty to go and make a claim lawfully, right, which is to take a specific procedure to become the owners of the thing that they possess.
So if somebody has a business and it's legally theirs.
It's legally theirs.
It's legally
right,
theirs, but lawfully is not theirs.
Mm-hmm. They are not the owners of the business. So let me give you a different example.
Okay.
So the other example is, let's say I have this hat on.
All right.
And I bought the hat.
Right.
I have the receipt for the hat.
Right.
I can say that I am the owner of the hat. And
right,
currently I possess the hat. So I possess and I own the hat.
Right.
If I give you the hat,
right,
I am still the owner of the hat.
Right.
But you
have possession.
You have possession. You are not the owner. You just have possession.
Right.
And if you accept possession of the hat,
right,
then if the hat becomes damaged, I can hold you liable for the hat. And part of the reason that can happen is because in me giving you the hat, I'm creating an agreement with you.
Okay.
Whether you contest the agreement or not, it's an agreement.
All right.
Where you contest the agreement, you say, hey, hold on a second. I'm holding on to your hat, but if I destroy this hat, I'm not going to pay you for the hat.
Right.
Then what you're doing in that agreement in that situation is that you are qualifying your position
Right.
in the arrangement.
Is it like removing liability for you from yourself?
It's 100% removing liability from yourself.
Okay.
Because then, if I do not accept it, what are you
Right.
going to do? You're going to give me the hat
The
back.
hat back, yeah.
Of course, right? And if
Of
I
course.
say yes, then that means I cannot hold you accountable for the hat.
So in simple terms, business owners have possession of something they do not legally own.
No. Oh, yes, sorry. So they have legal possession.
Right. Even
And-
though the business is written under their names and everything.
So let me explain.
Okay.
Because we don't want to confuse people.
All right.
So, and I'm making the distinction by saying lawful
Right.
and legal.
All right. So,
Okay, all right. I'm gonna always make that. And just before you say anything,
right.
you know, there are people who are gonna say, well, they're the same thing. But when people say that,
Right.
is that a presumption and is that an assumption? Did one go and do the verification and verify it for themselves? Because the realm of anything legal
Right.
is all based on presumption. You see, like I said,
Right.
you are holding on to the hat,
Right.
my hat,
Right.
and I'm not around. And
Okay.
somebody could say, "Hey, man, I like your hat," and you say, "Yeah, thank you." What did you just do? In a way, you committed a crime because you stated that
You're the owner of
without
the hat.
clarifying. You stated that it was your hat.
So you took presumption ownership.
Yeah, that's right. And so in the legal realm, they're going to say you are the registered owner,
Right.
which is true. You are the registered owner, but there's different types of owners, legally speaking.
Okay.
There are qualified owners, registered owners, absolute owners. There's a list of different types of owners.
Okay.
So again, legally, business-wise, where the registration is concerned, let's
Right.
look at where in the law that the law has provided people an opportunity to perfect their claim to what they registered. First of all, what you register is your equity.
Right.
It's your brainchild. You thought about it, right? So you have a stake in it. And the stake is you have an interest in it. So you need to land your interest in your estate because this is a part of the estate that you created. And you have many different types of relationships with these third-party government contractors, which create different accounts where they got to keep a record of your contributions into the economy. You have a business, you're contributing to the economy. But the problem is that the government can't do everything for you. And
Right.
why should they anyways? Because where the legal or the law is concerned, okay,
Right.
many people aren't reading the laws. They're not reading the laws. And they don't want to read the laws. And they're happy in making presumptive statements like, well, I paid my lawyer good money, and so I don't need to know anything. And God bless the hearts of lawyers and the minds of lawyers.
Right.
Because how can you deal with that kind of mentality from people? Almost, I mean, you can't do the work for everybody. But at the same time, where lawyers are concerned,
Right.
they're also within their jurisdiction and their contract. So that, again, if people don't understand that about lawyers and attorneys,
Right.
again, the liability rests on people. So where you can find in statute, in the legislation, in the laws
Right.
regarding personal property that is your business,
Right.
there's a part where it talks about when you register a business, how long it takes before you default and you become the debtor. So So, there's a grace period about 14 days that is given for one to, and these are the terms, to perfect their interest in their equitable creation, which has been given up to the government,
Right.
for an incorporation,
Okay.
which is great.
Right.
Okay. And so again, the venues and the solutions are also there for people to read and to use in order to move forward.
Right. So, thank you for that insight on lending interest for Estate Foundation. Now, you provide these services to people, right?
Well, the services that I provide to people is I provide a way of thinking about how to set up business structures.
Properly.
Whether it's properly or not, they're the options that exist. Everybody has to make up their own mind what they want to do.
Right.
That's number one.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
And so, yes, in a manner of speaking, we provide the options. And then people have to say, hey, I want to take these extra steps
Right.
to secure my business.
Right.
And most people don't want to do that because their priority is kind of getting their business going, and they really don't want to learn about it, and they believe, right? I mean, if you look at the definition, to believe is to be the lie, right? So and that's not a dig or an insult against people, but that's what they use as their front not to go past and their own insecurities and create protection and security for themselves.
What do you mean that you want the people to take extra steps to secure the business?
Well, again, their business is under a lease relationship. Why?
Also,
in the
relationship with the government, basically. Or
with the third-party entity, so-called the government, that is now the owner of your entity. So if I give him my hat and he doesn't say anything about the arrangement, whether he knows it or not, he's under an obligation to perform.
By default.
By default, he defaulted. And so later on, the hat gets damaged. I say, hey, you owe me X, Y, and Z for the hat.
You took possession.
So he's going to have a hard time saying no, especially if all of that is under contract. And so most people would say, well, I don't have a contract with the government. I don't have a contract with these third parties. But the beautiful thing about the government is that they have almost an infinite amount of laws.
Right.
So I had to find the Personal Property Security Act, for which they have the PPSR, the registry.
Right.
For those to file their interest regarding their intellectual property, their brainchild, their equity.
Right.
So that now they have a claim listed on some kind of a board that the other third parties can refer to say that perhaps this entity has priority over other entities, or even whatever claim we have before theirs. So the name of this game is it's the first in line, first in time, or first in time, first in line.
Is that the same as like copyright? Like, when you copyright something, it's legally yours, right?
Well, you have to be more specific concerning your question regarding copyright. But a copyright is a government program, right? Copywriting is great.
Okay.
Okay? If you don't know how to secure your property in any other way. So when you do the registration, it is a form of a contract. It is.
Okay.
So how can you create contracts for yourself? Typically, how do you go about doing that contract? So let's go back to the first example of the time travel equation on a piece of paper. What am I going to do to secure that? If if I do not wish to go and register it on a legal database? What can I do? Are there options? Do options exist? Are they sufficient?
Right.
Are they powerful?
Right. I mean, wow. So, from what I take on this statements that you just elaborated and touched on, people have to understand the type of ownership and what they mean.
What people need to understand is the difference between lawful and legal.
Right. That was my second point. So apart from people understanding what is legal and what is lawful, people need to understand the type of ownership and what they mean. So what type of ownership do they have on these so-called assets they have?
Well, they have
Presumption.
They have legal ownership. They are the registered owners of their business. There's no dispute there.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Hold
Right.
up. But they aren't lawful owners. They're not absolute owners of those businesses. So therefore,
Right.
at the end of the day, if somebody else says, for your own good, shut it down.
Right.
Well, if it's your hat,
Right.
you can't tell me that for my own good, that I don't know. I can't think of the example with the hat.
So
but-
let's say, for example, what's happening right now with COVID shutdowns? Businesses are being forced to shut
it's really
down.
important, really, to stay away from that. But we can kind of talk around that, right?
Okay.
So the reason that it's important to stay away from that is because, you know, the legal world has specific obligations which are tied into the biggest players in the legal world.
Right.
Okay, that's number one.
Right.
Okay, so the best way to understand that is legal is all corporate, it's all business.
Right.
Okay? And so where businesses are concerned, if you look at the statuses of business, you have individual sole proprietors, you have partnerships, you have limited, you have above limited, you have extra provincial corporations above that. In extra provincial corporations, there's corporations that can work between different provinces, and then you have corporations.
Right.
And the corporations can do businesses outside of Canada.
Right.
Okay. Typically speaking. And then above that, you have supranationals.
Supranationals. I've never heard.
Supras, S-U-P-R-A, supranational.
Supranationals. I
Right,
never
so-
heard of that before.
So there's all these different types of, like the UN is a supranational
Right.
organization. So you have, and there's a relationship between all these types of business structures.
Right.
Okay, which is important.
They all work together in some sort of a way.
Well, they're part of the matrix that connects them all together. What is that matrix? Well, that's money. That's the money that they use is called a debt note. That's not a negative or a positive statement. That's just, it's the realm of this jurisdiction.
Right.
And so debt is important in this realm. If you haven't been educated financially,
Right.
you're going to miss the boat, and you're going to become imbalanced in your projection about what these things are. When I say imbalanced, you're going to become either emotional or you're going to become too heady. You got to find a middle ground so that you can act right, and not lose yourself and start doing things that are detrimental to yourself and cause more liabilities. But so just to go back and answer the question,
Right.
do you remember your question again?
Yeah.
Yeah, could you just repose the question to refresh my mind?
So the copyright issue, I was just wondering if it would be the same.
I believe it was a different question.
Was it a different one?
Yeah, I believe so. But again, let me just speak to that if I haven't. So the copyright issue is the government sets up a program in order for people to secure their legal
Interest.
interest, but it's not, there's nothing lawful to that, which is it's not negative or positive, right? You just have a legal claim to superior other people's legal claim.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So I apologize if I didn't really answer your question,
No,
but
it's okay.
but I wanted to, when I was explaining the differences between the different types of business structures,
Right.
and I believe that we were talking about the COVID,
Right.
is that let's just talk around that regarding businesses.
Right.
Okay, let's just talk around it. And so government, they have an obligation, again, and this is just my opinion based on my research, but their obligation is they need to manage abandoned property.
Right.
So there's all this legal constructs, legal structures that exist. In fact, most people are stuck in a legal structure. Nobody's going to argue that, but they have no way out to plug themselves into a lawful structure. And the lawful structure is also based on the same fundamental principles that create the legal structure. What is that? That's understanding contracting. Okay? And the best way to secure property, and I'll give you a best way to secure property, is, and people call this the poor man's copyright. So now it comes back to what you're saying. Okay? And people challenge the effectiveness and the validity of the poor man's copyright. And what a poor man's copyright typically is that whatever your thoughts are, you seal it and you transfer, you do a transfer, you do a delivery, you do a service, you mail it, you do a conveyance, okay?
Right.
Yeah.
And you mail that to yourself, they say.
Okay.
Okay? And that's the poor man's copyright. Now, there's some technical problems with what I just described. And some of the technical problems in what I described is that we don't understand the difference between lawful and legal. And when I speak about lawful and legal in relationship to this poor man's copyright, to conveying this intellectual property to yourself, are you conveying it to your legal self? And it's not your legal self, and your legal person is a vessel, is an entity, is a person. And so when they say person, these are legal terminologies, all right? They're speaking commerce. This is all commerce. So which entity are you conveying this intellectual property to? So that brings up the issue of jurisdiction.
Right.
And so what jurisdiction is jurisdiction is like the line that divides lawfulness
Right.
and legalness. All right? Jurisdiction is the line that divides these two realms.
That's why you hear sometimes different police jurisdictions, they say, oh, I don't have jurisdictions over that.
That's because they follow rules, mandates, policy
Right.
within their realm, and many persons,
Right.
that's a commercial term, financial term, are subject to their jurisdiction where they cannot show that. To show a right is to have a right is to show that you're not in that jurisdiction. How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? What documents did you create to demonstrate the right that you were speaking about having? So speaking, thinking, beliefs, they're all in the same jurisdiction. They're all presumptions. And presumptions, what do? They create controversy. And you're not going to win in a jurisdiction that is run on presumption. You're not going to win because you can only win with settling disputes, settling arguments. You know, like settlement,
Right.
like dirt on your feet. You got to have the dirt in your hand. You got to have the substance in your hand. You don't got no substance. What are you doing? You're just talking at the mouth.
Is it the same? And at some point, I want to talk about title bench. Is it the same when people go to provincial court? And is it presumption court? Or Supreme Court? Is it a different?
Listen, like
In simple terms.
the what's been built
Right.
has a function and a purpose.
Right. Okay.
Number one, okay?
100% agree with you on that.
Okay. And so the attitude to take is you need to take the middle path. And the middle path is you got to be neutral and understand that there's value within high voltage electricity and high voltage magnetism. That's just like saying, when you're really scared, right? That's a
Right.
lot of high voltage electricity going through you.
Of course.
And when you're all lovey-dovey and floating in the wind, when you're all magnetic, positive and negative together, that's
Right.
magnetism right there, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You got to take the middle path between the two, right? Those are metaphors for not only thinking and not only some of the constitutions or the constituents that compose your constitution.
Right.
So going back to the court,
Right.
okay? They're not going to deny who they are.
Of course.
Why should they deny it? It's written. It's written.
It's a fact. It's on paper.
Right. So they are a de facto court. And some people will argue, well, de facto means fact. And that's just a problem of just people who aren't doing the work that want credit for work they don't do.
So it's just a matter of understanding terminology. It's de facto fact.
The more terminology that you have a good grasp on, I don't want to say understand,
Right.
you have a good grasp on, what is the grasp? You're holding on to that, right?
Right.
The easier it is for you to stay in the center. So that you're not pulled side to side
Right.
by competing interest. Where's your interest?
When you say competing interests, what do you mean?
Well, so the government is going to follow through on its interest. It has to follow through on its interest. Why?
It's mandated under some of their written.
It creates programs for those who can't create programs from themselves. There's nothing wrong with that. For example, there's people in our society that require assistance because nobody else can help them.
Right.
But other people can create business structures for those people, but they don't. They want to be in this money gain. And I'm not saying that you can't make money with certain types of business structures. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
I'm saying where you don't perform specific types of services, other people that can see a profit in it are
Right.
going to step in because there's a void in the market.
Right. So they're filling the void.
Yeah, of course, that's what happens. Negative or positive, the void gets filled.
And then you get called a shark for doing that. The society tend to condemn people that take opportunities like that.
That's okay that people want to be emotional.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with being emotional when you can come back to the center. There's nothing wrong with being emotional when you can come back to the center. When you know that your primal position is the center,
Right.
sometimes it's good to give some people a little bit of fire
Right.
and come back. I have a lot of students.
Right.
I have a lot of members
Right.
that they want to take. They want
Right.
to, they are consumers. And so what's the difference between what you're already doing which is you're a consumer in the eyes of the third party government contractors. That's all that you are, because they provide a product and they want you to consume it,
Right.
but at a cost, because they got to be the administrators for your consumption, because you don't know how to manage your car. You're just dumping waste all over the place, like leaving a car on the side of the road and,
Right.
and thinking, being entitled
Right.
and being like, well, someone else is going to come and do it. This is a game of life. This is, and the game of life is is the big picture, which means that, the government is almost like a microcosm
Right.
and the guardian of what you're supposed to do for self-stabilization. What is
Okay.
self-stabilization? You're only really dealing with your own self-manifest. You know, you have a negative frame of mind. Well, you produce the consequences of your projection.
Right.
The people that you hang out with are a reflection of what your life has become.
Right.
Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So the bigger picture of life will manifest itself in the two major forces that exist in the universe. What are they? I'm not going to say good and evil because we can move past that. You know, it's like good and evil is kind of like the story you kind of tell children. But when they grow past that, you can start using more scientific terms to show the same types of relationships. We're talking about these two forces,
Right.
which are electricity,
Right.
and magnetism, and then the fusion between the two is literally what people are anyways. And then even beyond that, there is energy that just cannot be detected by the equipment for electromagnetism. So this is the higher game of life. And so when you move past these two basic functions of who you are, I mean, you're only going to be able to do that by finding the middle road.
So not to cut you, but that brings us to the legal lawful side.
So let's bring it back to that. Ask the question.
Because my question was, when people are dealing in the provincial court, according to my understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we go back to the legal presumption, environment, and chances are you might lose, for example, traffic court.
Well, let's just extend it. It's not just provincial court. There's different courts. Let's just go through some of the courts. There's traffic court. And traffic court may not even be here in the future because
Right.
traffic court wasn't really always there in the past.
Right.
Provincial court.
Because in my understanding too, in the traffic court, those quote unquote judges are called justice of peace.
Yeah, but is there a point to what you're saying? Does it matter what titles they give themselves? None
Well,
of it
a
matters.
lot of people, especially our viewers, when I know I have gotten speeding tickets, I have friends that we ride motorcycles together. They have got tickets for whatever infractions they may or may not have committed. But myself, before I started reading some of your stuff, I understood that these guys are judges, just like you would go to a family court, just like you would go to criminal court. Those are judges, and then
So just slow down.
Right.
I think what their titles are is almost irrelevant. That's not the point.
to somebody who understands them, yes, it's irrelevant. But to people who are just brought up, like for example, a lot of immigrants come here.
Well, let me contextualize my statement before you give too much credit to people.
Okay.
Because in contextualizing it, I'm also doing whoever's listening to this a favor as well.
Right.
So let's go through the courts.
Right.
Traffic, provincial, and then in different provinces, you know, they have Queen's Bench. In other provinces, they have Supreme.
Right.
That's 3.
Okay.
And then there's family. And Supreme Court has different courts. There's family court, Supreme Court, the civil court, and Supreme Court.
Right.
There's probate court.
Right.
Some places it's called surrogate court.
Right.
And even in the name surrogate, it's kind of a funny.
Sure.
It's revealing. And then beyond that, there's federal court.
Right.
And back to Supreme Court or Superior Court in
Right.
some provinces or Queen's Bench. Let's just look at civil court.
Right.
All the other courts, including civil, but civil
Right.
is unique.
Why?
Civil is unique because civil court is the court that allows you to bring in your law. And very simple. People are like, oh, my law. I don't even know what your law is. you have a contract between two people, and there is a dispute, there's a breach of that contract. You bring that contract in. And so the court, that civil court, is ruled upon based on that contract, the terms of that contract, the terms of that law. That's the uniqueness. Hold up a second.
Okay.
Of that court. So again, understanding lawful and legal.
Right.
I'm not saying that bringing in your own contract is lawful or legal. Your own contract is a contract that has nothing to do with the statutes, with the laws that already exist. If you go into civil court and you don't know what you're talking about,
Right.
then what's going to happen is the court is going to have to almost take over and help you out, but they're going to use the statutes that have already been provided to help settle or provide relief.
On your behalf.
On your behalf. Why? Because you've abandoned your duty. You've abandoned your rights. Again. Let's understand the importance of the court, the government. Let's understand the importance of the artificial structure, as some people would like to call it. Let's understand that.
Yeah.
Okay?
All right.
So that's provided for you in court.
Right.
Okay? And so there's a semblance between what is legal
Okay.
and what is a semblance in what is your own law you're bringing in.
Right. So in simple terms, when it comes to civil court, you're allowed to bring in your own law, quote unquote, that you and the other party have agreed on, that can be exercised as the base to judge whatever you have dispute against.
That's right. And like any foreclosures, any mortgage, any bank disputes, what are they going to do? They're going to bring in the contract. Hey, he breached this contract.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
Although the contract may tie into other
things.
legislation, but they're still going to bring in that contract. And so therefore you got to know that contract. And most people don't even read the contract. Again, what do? They've abandoned their...
Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Their
We're running
duty,
out of
their
minutes,
rights.
but title bench in 5 minutes. What can you tell us about it?
Well, title bench is a lawful registry
Right.
that was produced, that was created from more or less the success of teaching people about business structures, number one, and how to build a trust,
Okay.
how to convey a trust, and how to take a lawful position,
Right.
even if they have legal accounts, legal
Right.
businesses. So title bench helps and assists people cover the commercial landscape. And remember, the commercial landscape is legal and it's lawful.
Okay.
And so, again, it helps people cover that by understanding full spectrum commerce. And title bench allows people to register their process. And that process provides them a type of evaluation system for the fact that they finally have property. Because legally, you're not even allowed to own property. Everybody's a debtor. If somebody else owns your business, tells you got to shut your business down, how can you call yourself the owner?
Oh, so this basically helps people and it gives them information on how to lawfully own their businesses, right?
Well, when you say this helps people, first of all, we have Land and Interest for Estates Foundation,
Right.
which is ran by a trust, and Land and Interest for Estates Foundation is constituted in order to produce different types of problem-solving artifices or structures to help fill the gap legally. So in order for them to move into title bench, they would have to go through Land and Interest for Estates Foundation to be able to produce the mechanism so that they can call themselves actual property owners.
Right. And
And then Land and Interest for Estates Foundation will pass the information over to Title Bench, which is the registry.
Okay.
So, from my understanding, Title Bench is a registry for unincorporated and trust.
No. Title Bench is a registry for lawful property owners. Remember, you believe as the word, again, the operative word, look it up, that you are the owner of property. You could call this whatever you like to call it, but the truth is staring everybody in the face. You just go and do the work, and nobody's going to dispute that. So people believe that they're the owners of these businesses, which is fine.
Right. Well, they might say they have some documents because when you register,
it doesn't matter. They're legal owners. They can't even use the word lawful in the proper context. But when they do, they discover that there is still a step or a procedure that they need to take to become lawful owners. And typically, the way that works is this. Because everything around us is commerce. In fact, we have to learn the language of commerce in financing.
Yes.
We're talking about vessels and vehicles. A person is a vessel and a vehicle, and there's different statuses of vessels and vehicles as I have described. So because everything is commerce around us, there's only one type of vessel that can make a claim for property. What is that? It's a trust. And as I speak about a trust, in the landscape of commerce, a trust exists on both sides of the ledger.
Very interesting.
So therefore, people can say, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I have a trust. Right? And I'm not saying that your trust is negative or your trust is positive, but in many cases, if you have a trust, and if an attorney is the trustee for your trust, then that's a different type of a trust than the trust that may be offered by different types of third-party KYC participants.
KYC.
Know your client.
Know your client.
Know your client participants.
For those people that might have questions of what is KYC. KYC is know your client's participation. And when you go open a bank account, they make you sign this document. It says KYC, know your client. You must when you're trying to open anything with banks, especially as you mentioned, commerce. If you're doing commerce, if you want to open it, they make you sign a KYC. Especially for advisors like myself. I am a licensed advisor for mutual funds. So yes, we have KYCs. We normally have to explain to clients what they are and how they operate. So I appreciate you for bringing that up. Now, to the viewers, you have been notified that Title Bench is a registry, and we will have links.
Well, Title Bench is not up.
It's not up yet.
It's not up. Title Bench is in the process of self-manifestation.
Now,
all the proper documentation for Title Bench exists.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
I know a lot of our viewers will be interested to understand more. How can they reach you, or what should they do to learn more about this? Do you provide classes, sessions that they can join in?
Well, typically, there are information sessions, but one would have to become a member. It's really important to respect the public and also to respect the private. It's really important. And the reason why is simple is because you have to let people choose for themselves.
Okay.
And a lot of it has to do with courage.
Right.
A lot of people don't have any courage, even courage to read. So no, they cannot contact me at this point in the game because my plate is full.
All right.
And, but even if they happen to contact me, regardless, I don't know how they would be able to find me.
Right.
But, they would also have to become a member. And, and on this subject matter, I only talk about the procedures in terms of getting themselves protected in a trust-to-trust manner.
Trust manner. Okay.
Yeah. So last thing regarding Title Bench is the venue to creating a trust-to-trust network.
Beautiful. Thank you for that insight. Now, my last and final topic was Manuscript, Healing Blocks. You authored this article, or I don't even know what to say because it's such a powerful article to the point where I don't know how to categorize it. I've not finished the whole thing. I have part 1, 3, 2, 3, and 4 of this, and I was just on part 1 of this. Now, what was going on, or what brought about healing blocks? What motivated you to write such an article?
Well, Healing Blocks is a document that was produced with 2 other people. Yes, it's true. I did author the documentation.
Right.
But it was done as an experiment and as a hypothesis. Okay. And it's written also like in scientific or methodical exploration of a specific subject matter. We're going to get to that subject matter in a second. And we conceived the idea by putting out a website to answer a few questions. It was a survey, and the survey specifically was on racism. And so Healing Blocks is a manuscript on personal development, specifically for Black people or people of color. And
Right.
really, it's for anybody specifically. And it's written in a manner where, although we use terms like Black people, and it's really frowned upon to identify people as these colorable terms. And you know that I have a background in looking at legal and lawful and understanding the terms.
Right.
Based on my understanding, it's almost dangerous to identify yourself in speech where you live in a commercialized environment. So the manuscript was created to discuss personal development in a highly charged racial environment. And I know that a lot of Black people are going through a lot of intense upheaval
Right.
regarding what they feel around them, which is the racialized environment,
Right.
and how to look at that from a different perspective. And as we go through the documentation, there are historical points of view that look at language, right? So one of the ways of going through this document is we look at language
Right.
and how it's important to change your language structure so that that becomes part of your healing.
Right.
Okay. And because if it's understood that we create our reality,
Right.
well, we do it through our mind,
Okay.
and we communicate what we think, and we communicate with words.
All right.
And if we choose not to look at the meaning of words, although many believe, again, there's the word, that the words are just what they mean,
Right.
then they themselves are locking themselves in a prism of their own self-manifest. So this is a way of helping people look through the environment as a macrocosm of themselves, and themselves being the microcosm, and they have
Right.
a relationship. And so I speak about these 2 types of relationships, these polarities constantly
Right.
from my research into developing a mathematical formula on consciousness.
Okay.
And that was done a few years back. And so that's really set the stage for my perception on problem solving.
Okay.
I introduced myself as somebody who has a spirit and a motivation to solve problems.
Right.
I got into this position because I too went through a moment of being brutalized by different third-party government structures, whether that was police or that was the court systems, etc.
Right.
And you can allow these things to defeat you. And what that means is you yourself become polarized in your own self-conception, in your own self-being. The parts of you that you need to utilize in order to create the world, but you do so by understanding that you need to find a middle ground. So this is how this came about. And again, like I said, it came about from exploring some questions that we had posed on a survey on a website, and we got a variety of people who answered the questions, and then from there, that was used to create this manuscript. And the manuscript, again, is a way of helping people move through the tension. And so
Right.
what I want to do is, if you don't mind, I want to just read part of the hypothesis which brought forth the manuscript. The manuscript is not difficult to get through, but
Right.
most people would say that the language structure is for people who are more educated, but that's not true. Anybody can get a dictionary. Anybody can go through and just help themselves out. But the way the concepts are put together might hold you in a certain place where you have difficulty moving through, because the concepts are holding you to think about what is being said.
Right.
So I just want to begin by exploring just a part of the manuscript. Okay.
Okay.
And I think this is a great place to start. So, and I'm going to more or less paraphrase as I go through this documentation. So we may all be all one, and that's a statement that you might have heard. Mm-hmm. And it's a statement and it's a journey. But where this statement could be true, like that we are all one,
Right.
is with knowledge. If we are all one, well, how does that work? Knowledge is easily achieved in honesty and shared in trust. Okay? Now, trust is also, it's a two-way participation. For example, if I give him my hat and he doesn't say anything, then he hasn't really participated in the trust. So that means that I can hold them to an accountable level until he performs and defines who he is in the relationship. That's a trust-to-trust relationship. If you give away your trust, you just pretty much put yourself in an implied arrangement. It's all presumptive. Where the statement is false, that we are all one, is with ignorance. Knowledge and ignorance cannot coexist.
Right.
Ignorance thrives off innocence and the distortion of knowledge into bits of information. Ignorance cannot sustain or thrive in an ignorant environment, and over time will self-destruct. Again, I'm going to repeat that. Ignorance cannot sustain nor thrive in an ignorant environment. And over time, it will self-destruct. So ignorance thrives off taking bits of truth and distorting it. That's how it thrives. Ignorance exists in the hearts of all of our institutions, yet so does knowledge and information. Our minds seem to be caught up in the crossfire between our physical world, planet, continents, nations, villages, countries, communities, personal identification, personal identities, and personal identities are being torn apart by so many of these consuming forces. The outlook of our internal selves are left with the sense of helplessness about oneness, or coming to peace about the consuming forces that separate our attention from we are all one. Of course, many will ask how. And that's a sensible question. How are we all one? Perhaps we are all one and we are not all one. And together, if we accept that, we can move forward. This is the complicated truth. And the complicated truth is a paradox. And only with education will that mystery begin to unravel itself. So I'll just end it there. So, and I write that because the manuscript is written where the term black is italicized. So black, italicized, people. So when you read it, you're not supposed to read anything that is italicized on a document. It means it's not there. So really, I'm referring to people, but because so many people are stuck in their own identification processes, whatever they need to lead themselves to the next step in seeing the relationships is their process and their journey.
Right.
Okay? So, in a lot of ways, this is the reason why this was written. And it was written because primarily I was just getting really tired of people identifying themselves outside of the bigger picture. What is the bigger picture? Well, the bigger picture is that, yes, we are physical, again, the polarity concept again, and we are also non-physical. We are tangible, and we are also non-tangible. And how do those relationships express themselves properly in speech and language so that we can move past getting stuck into these physical constructs, just like we're getting stuck into these presumptive constructs. And we know that the power of presumption is what runs what we call the legal world.
Right.
That's really good. Summing up everything, I just want to get your final thoughts on, like, if people want to be able to lawfully and legally own stuff, where should they go in order to get this all set up before we wrap this up?
I think that's a good question, and I'll reiterate and paraphrase and power phrase.
Yeah.
And where can people get to gain the knowledge between the commercial world that's around them? Where can they go to get that knowledge?
Yeah, where can they go?
And today they're being introduced to the concept of the commercial world being a ledger. And that ledger being divided up into two, where the line that divides them is jurisdiction. Where can you go to learn about this stuff? I'm just expressing it in the way that I can in order to bring people in and draw their attention. Yet, the information is everywhere. It also exists within the legal constructs of the world, because the law, legality, does its best to be equitable. In fact, it tries to mirror what is lawful. It tries to mirror what is lawful. So people can go and just read statutes. But a lot of people don't want to do that. They don't want to educate themselves. And part of the problem there is that it's difficult, and sometimes you need a guide to do that.
Yes.
Okay. Also, it's not just reading statutes, but you also have to understand the principles in just general contracting. General contracting is the relationship that you have between people. So I gave the best example with the hat example earlier on in this session, and that's a relationship. And any relationship can be put into a construct, a legal construct, a written construct, a contract that is outside of presumption, a contract that has been accounted for, right? So that we don't have to rely on presumption. Oh, I think that you said this in X, Y, and Z.
Right.
So also understanding accounting, understanding the law, and understanding contracting. And the information is out there, okay?
Right.
And so some of the valuable pieces of information that I've offered today is that lawful and legal. Okay, do your best to do research on what that is, and then that should help you move forward, because anything that is legal is not actual. There's a presumption, and so in order to make things fact and actual, then there's a little bit of work that people have to do, and that work is learn how to contract. The other last piece of information that I gave to people is that because everything that surrounds them is commerce, there's only one type of a vehicle, right? Vehicle meaning a corporation that has the capacity of making a claim for property. There's only one. What is that? That is a trust. How does it do that? It does so by a declaration of trust. And what a declaration of trust does is it identifies the trustee, identifies the trustee's obligations, and identifies the beneficiary. And so in commerce, it's difficult to be the trustee and the beneficiary at the same time, because what happens is that it collapses a trust. So That's another piece of information. Again, it's all out there for people to go and research, and have a guide if you can. And that's the best way to go about it, is my suggestion and recommendation for people.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bernard.
Thank you for having me
Yes.
Yes, it's been a pleasure.
at the Dilla and Dougie
Experience.
experience.
Right. Dougie, you got any other questions for...
No, I think that's basically it.
Right. This was very insightful. And the more I read the manuscript, Healing Blocks, the more questions I have. And I just try to compute or comprehend how you would sit and think of such things and to put them on a piece of paper in that manner and author the article the way you did. Dude, it's impressive.
Well, thank you.
It's very impressive. I mean, I would like to read more of these, and I want you to write more articles of such nature for curiosity minds, and sharing your knowledge and sharing what you have read or come across, and we can learn from it.
Yeah, that's something that is also in the works.
Okay.
Again, Healing Blocks is a joint effort. I did author the documentation,
Right.
and it's still going through some edification.
Right.
And it will be available for sale or for download.
Okay.
And it really is a prelude into a mathematical system that was derived and developed for consciousness. And I know that sounds like a big statement.
Right.
And that mathematical concept is known as light mathematics.
Light mathematics.
Yeah, light math. Okay.
Okay.
And essentially, again, I always move from the position of consciousness. Consciousness is a whole experience, meaning that, you have to take in the macrocosm and the microcosm.
Macrocosm and microcosm.
Right. That's like yourself as an individual.
Okay.
And if you close your eyes, everything around you. And if you open your eyes, everything around you, and the relationship between yourself and that. And there's a relationship between those two. And in different disciplines and faculties, they refer to that as the field. And so in a way, light mathematics is a field equation for consciousness.
Interesting.
And the way the field equation for consciousness came about,
Right.
was a mathematical principle that resolved the unification of duality.
Duality.
Polarity, duality, opposites, whatever you want to call it. So the yin and the yang, let's call it, right?
Yes.
Okay. How do these two things work together, come together mathematically? And so there was a process that I developed that explained that. And once that was developed, that created a field. And then I've been working with that field ever since. The principle that I'm speaking to you about was vetted
Right.
years back. So this was developed about maybe 20 years plus ago.
20 years ago is when you
Developed this system.
the system.
Yeah, 20 years ago. Maybe it was like maybe 22 years ago. 22 years ago, the system was developed.
And you have been refining this for 20 years.
Well, in a way, I've been refining the system in moving into different disciplines.
Right.
For example, moving into learning about the commercial system, the contractual system,
Right.
and finding the similarities within that system that reveal these two polarities. So we talk about lawful, legal,
Right.
private, public,
Yes.
and where you can find that within the law. It exists. It all exists. So greater consciousness always infuses itself within just about everything that we do. So the principles always exist there. You just got to find them.
Okay.
And so in a way, it was a major effort to move away from commerce because I had been stuck developing commercial systems for so long.
Right.
One of the commercial systems is Title Bench, and moving back into developing light math as a tool for healing.
So using mathematics for healing.
Well, the mathematics were used in order to help people understand the relationships between themselves and how to speak about those relationships in a manner that people could relate to and show them the relationship in a so-called operational level, in a mathematical level. When I say operational level, we mean plus, negative, heavy, light. Those are operations.
Right.
So in an operational manner, so that they're moving away from the information that they've learned, and they are beginning to generate self-initiation from themselves by understanding these basic principles.
Right.
Right? And so when you're all stuck, feeling all bothered about a world that you believe owes you something,
Right.
when you get all caught up in entitlement, well, let's look at what entitlement means. Entitlement is a compound word. Title, which is the word, and it gets negated by en, entitled. I mean, somebody who's fighting a championship bout for the belt to become the title,
Right.
just does it. They don't talk about how someone owes them that. So there's a bridge we have to cross,
Right.
in order to get to holding the title.
Okay.
Okay?
And you have to fight for that.
I mean, call it fighting, but I just say you gotta perform. You gotta create the substance.
Right.
You gotta create the substance. And if you do nothing, then you got nothing. And when you have nothing, you can't ask for something. You know, there's a universal principle of work.
Right.
You know, whatever you work for, nobody can take away from you. Even if somebody takes that house, the work that you've actually accumulated is not really physical. And so again, it goes back to, what are we? We are both physical and we are also both non-physical, right? For example, you can't see my thoughts.
Right.
But I express them. But you can kind of see my thoughts by my behavior. You know, if I am confident, you can see it in my gestures. If I am insecure, you can see it in my gestures.
Right.
So we do reveal aspects of our nature, our dual natures, to people,
Right.
on a regular basis. And if we can identify that within ourselves, then we can identify that within others.
Right.
Right? So how do we do that? You got to be truthful about what you're going through. And so I'll give you another example of this. So I have a friend who is going through a situation and they have to confront an event. And when you confront an event and you overcome the event, you gain that confidence. Nobody can take that away from you. It's knowledge that you gain, and you can use it to overcome other moments.
Right.
And the trick is honesty, but it may not appear as though the trick is honesty, but let's get into how we get to honesty. So this is the scenario. So the first question is, they're asked, are you afraid? And people have a different way of saying no when they are afraid, of deflecting. One of them is nervous laughter.
Right.
And you already know that they're afraid, and whether you know it or not is not the issue, because
Right.
you are a facilitator to help them get to the next place. So when you are a good facilitator,
Right.
you're not just hearing, your mind isn't just picking up the word,
Right.
but your physical body is feeling their vibration, because when you get into a place of honesty, that's a vibration. And when you get into a place of being in denial, that's a vibration. And so as a good facilitator, you know.
All right.
And so, no, ha ha ha, nervous chuckle,
Right.
right? So you know, but you got to get around it. How are you going to do that? So you ask them another question in a different way, right? To the point where they've already taken their position, and eventually you're going to exhaust them, and they're going to be vocal and say they either give up or they're going to get in your face about it. Okay?
Right.
And so in this situation, the person confesses and says, you know, you always ask me these questions, and every single time I always fail. And my response to them is, let's just unpack that for a second. I always ask you the same questions, and the same question is just about you being honest.
Right.
Because what you're asking for is you want me to give you information about something that you need to do. You're going to write it down, but I believe and I know. So when I believe, I have a feeling about it.
Right.
Only you can certify it so I can move past belief. I believe and know.
Right.
And if I can't tell you that I know, you're going to get upset. So I believe and know that you're not being honest, but you say to me that you always fail these situations. And I believe that the proper answer is just to say that you are afraid.
Right.
And this person says, I always fail. And I say, well, if it's true that I give you the same questions and the answer which you're supposed to come to an understanding, an agreement to is, yes, I am afraid. And you know that in some aspect of yourself, but you say no, and then you reveal that you always fail. A part of you knows that you're in denial. A part of you knows that you're not being truthful.
Right.
And so the person goes into silence. And then I continue and say, you know, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to admit that you're afraid. And when you admit that you're afraid, you're supposed to become one with the fear. And when you become one with the fear, let the fear overtake you until it bothers you. And when it bothers you, you get to a point where you start to think, because, you know, fear overrides your emotional body, and you start to think, hey, like, what am I afraid of? I'm afraid of this. I'm afraid of asking this person at this place who gets paid $10 an hour, or who has no authority, or who's not a doctor, who's making these biased claims. I'm afraid to ask them these questions. And when you come to that place, you know what happens? You get angry. And when you get angry, and when you use your anger effectively by thinking about why you're afraid, the knowledge of what you're supposed to do floods you.
Right.
And although you're coming to me and you're asking me what to do, and if I had given you that answer, what would I have done? I would have robbed you of your struggle. And if I rob you of your struggle and given you that answer, there's no way that you would have ever been able to gain that actual knowledge, that energy, that actual experience, that vibration. You would never have found the proper resonance for yourself. I would have robbed you of your struggle and your experience. And so at that point, their vibration literally changed at that moment, and they started just speaking the right things. And we use that opportunity to just unpack the process in which they got to that place. Where's that place? That place is a vibration, is a resonant sensation and vibration. That person got to that place. And how can you get to that place all the time? And the answer is, in part, is you got to be honest with yourself.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. Bernard.
Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you have a wonderful day. Peace out.